Hello and welcome to the podcast that explores the heartlands entertainment industries. I'm Brian.
I'm Kelly.
And today we're going to be talking about mastering with the master of mastering, Kevin Lively. But before we do, I'm going to check in with my co-host here, Kelly. I just said Kevin, almost called you Kevin.
That's my brother's name, actually, so it works.
Is it really?
Yep, Kevin,
oh, wow.
Kelly. So Kevin, the master, and Kelly.
And Kelly. So how's it going, Kelly?
You know, I'm not going to lie. It's been a little brutal.
Has it?
It has. It's been rough. I don't have, like, a positive Kelly's Corner story to share with you.
Okay.
I have one of the toughest 2 days story. One of those stories. As you know, it's busy season for my husband, so he is not around at all right now.
Mm-hmm.
However, kids don't care and definitely still get sick during that time.
Yeah. Kids don't care about your feelings.
Kids don't care about anything.
Where's Dad?
So, Dad's dead. No, I'm sorry, that's not a funny joke, but I actually say that to them. That's brutal.
He's dead because you
We're
were
terrible.
bad today.
You can call it down the line, Brian, when my kids go to therapy. You can call it right now is because we joke about, like, mommy's leaving forever when I walk out of the house. Or, like, yeah, where's Daddy? He's never coming home. Like, I don't know what it is. We do that. It's terrible.
I'm going to do that same thing.
Aaron
I do that with my dogs right now.
Like, I know. I don't know why. When my daughter asks me, she's just like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going forever. Bye. I love you. Like, she knows I'm kidding.
Make dinner.
They laugh.
Yeah.
But
Oh, Mom. And then one day, she never did.
She never did.
She never came back.
I'm
going out for some cigarettes.
That's so sad.
And then she never
came back. And then we saw her on TV years later.
Yeah. No. Turns out she was looking for flavored vapes, and it was really, really hard to find. So she was being honest. She was being truthful. It just literally took that long for her to find the flavored vapes. She had to go to the black market.
Yeah,
it was a whole thing.
No, so, okay. Anyway, so I come home. My kids and I have had a really good day, and I come home, it's like 4 p.m. And a lot of the times I have a hard time, kids aren't good at expressing what they're feeling. So, like, physically. Excuse me. So I have to play a lot of guessing games when they tell me a weird symptom of their body. I'm basically a doctor, Brian.
Gotcha.
I have to diagnose whatever weird thing they're talking about and figure out what it possibly could be because they cannot tell me. So, when your eyes hurt, if someone's like, my eyes hurt, it's probably a headache. Or my nose hurts. It's probably not your nose. It's maybe more your sinuses and you have, like, congestion.
Yeah.
So my daughter tends to, and I love her so much, but she tends to not have very frequent BMs. And so I'm going to say it in the most polite way.
She's an infrequent pooper for the layman.
She's not as regular as my other two. So a lot of times she'll come up to me and say, Mommy, my tummy hurts. And I'll be like, oh, you need a prune packet, girl. And we'll get, like, prune packets or whatever we have to do to solve the problem. Sometimes she'll say, like, I need to go lay down. Usually it's because she has, like gas or something.
Yep.
Well, Coraline comes to me and she is looking rough just for her. She's sprightly still, like, energetic, but she's like, Mommy, like, my mouth is hot. I was like, what?
Your mouth is hot?
That's a weird thing. I was like, did you eat something recently? Like, do you need some water? Kind of like, what's the next step of my mouth is hot, my mouth is dry, like, you're thirsty? Going through the process of, like, what do you want? She's like, yeah, I need some sparkling water. And then she loves sparkling water. So I give her a sparkling water. She chugs it down. And I was like, okay, she was thirsty. Problem solved. About 10 minutes later, she comes back. She's like, Mommy, I taste salt. And I'm like, that's a weird. Is
she having a stroke?
A tumor? Yeah, I don't know what's going on. And then a minute later, she vomits all over me.
Oh,
and I immediately was like, got it. My mouth is hot. You know that taste? Yeah. I thought, so I'm going, it's because she chugged that sparkling water and the carbonation like got to her. And I'm like, you probably feel better now. She's like, I feel so much better. No big deal.
I feel like this is like you're like the modern medicine woman.
I'm like, I know. Yes. Thank you. I'm like, okay, I think we got it handled. She bolts off. I'm sorry, this is like a long story, but she bolts off, barfs 15 more times. I mean, just all over the house. It's miserable. And I was like, got it. We're sick. Got it.
Message received.
It out. And of course, my son, he comes to me, he's like, my stomach's not feeling well. I'm like, you're gonna. I basically was very honest with him.
It.
I was like, Oliver, it's gonna be a rough 24 hours for you.
Yeah.
Because he knows what throwing up is. Coraline has no idea. So like, we buckled down. I called Aaron at like 6 p.m. and I was like, I'm gonna need you home because I'm changing so many things. Everly, I don't want her to get it. I need you home. So he comes home.
Bring the hazmat suit. Bring the respirators.
Yes, and then. You know, I'm like saying, we're all praying. All of us are just like praying that we don't all get it. Like, if there's nothing you can do. Once one person has a stomach bug in your house, you are screwed.
The whole family
goes down.
The whole family
will get it.
Oh, man.
Well, here's the thing. No one else got it. And then, I'm like, now is the time to Sherlock this and go, maybe it was food. What did my 2 older kids have that no one else in the house had? And I'm going to straight up throw them under the bus. It was Starbucks, their little kid hot chocolates, my kid up.
What?
That's the only food item that they had that I did not have that day.
Oh, man.
We went through and got Starbucks hot chocolates. I didn't get anything. Everly was napping. They drank those things, and I guarantee you maybe the cream was old or the milk or something.
It's like, well, our creamer's a little chunkier today than normal.
It was, well, there's a, like,
why does it taste sour, Mom?
Yeah, well, it's Starbucks hot chocolate. I don't know.
Freaking boo, Starbucks.
Yeah.
How do you mess up hot chocolate?
I don't know. And it might not have been there. But, like, I'm going to stick with that because both those kids got sick within 15 minutes of each other, puked for 6 hours, and then they were done. And none of us ever got it. None of us ever got it. So I think it was food poisoning. That's my final. That was my week. That was that week. That was like a good week.
So that kind of reminds me of today's topic in a way.
Okay. All right.
So, segue challenge
Yeah, let's figure
here.
segue challenge how we get there.
You know, so whenever you're recording an album, there can be things that are wrong with the sound of that album that you, as the musician, you don't even realize. Like, you don't even
know what's going on.
So you need a guy to come in and diagnose the issues and solve the issues. Frickin' segue challenge. Boom.
That was perfect.
Boom, y'all.
So basically what I'm trying to say is I am the masterer of my kids.
Your
Because
kid's
I
sickness.
figured out with my brain powers what was going on once they puked on me.
Mom brain master.
Yes. I mean, it makes so much sense. Yes, as a master, you need to diagnose what an artist cannot tell is wrong or hear or know.
That's right.
That they don't know.
So today we're going to unveil all the wizardry, all the alchemy that happens behind the veil of what exactly mastering is with our conversation with mastering master, Kevin Lively. Kevin Lively, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
You're actually a bucket list guy that I've been wanting to talk to for a really, really long time.
Our working potential guests for how long?
Because you're the mastering master. Now, you have a studio out of ACM at UCO.
Yes.
And how long have you been in the industry? Kind of give us a quick overview of the career that is Kevin Lively.
Let's see, about 28 years. Actually.
Oh my gosh.
27 and a half years or so.
So you know
That's
a thing
when I
or
got
two.
out of school. Yeah. I'm dating myself a lot here.
Man, and I think, so right out the gate, we're talking about mastering. And, any of these young musicians that are up and coming, I think mastering is kind of one of those things that you, like, even me, and, like, I've done recording stuff for a really long time, and I think I know what mastering is. But how would you describe
What's mastering?
what mastering is?
Here's a master class on mastering.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Well, basically, mastering is obviously it's the final stage of the recording project. So, it's funny because I get phone calls all the time. People are like, "Hey, can you do the vocals and mix and master?" I'm like, "Well, no, I don't typically. I just master nowadays. I mean, I used to record and mix, but and they're not even ready. They just know the term, so they think, okay, I need to have that done, and it's like they haven't even done vocals yet. So, so what it really is it's taking your mix and trying to present it in the best way possible, really, so it'll connect with your fans. Because typically, whenever you're working on your song, you do a rough mix, and obviously it sounds all the bones are there, but it's not done until you're mixed. And then when you mix, you blend all the, the vocal and the bass and the drums and all that stuff together. And then at that point, whether you're working on one song or you're working on like 10 or 12 songs, they're not all real cohesive yet. And they're not all necessarily presented to, the platforms that you stream or buy music from. They're not in a format, and they're not balanced necessarily properly for each other and for it to sound like it belongs.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back a few years, I mean, everybody, we used to deal with the iPods and stuff, and you'd have playlists, and you'd have different levels and stuff. And, over time, from like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever, 2020s, it's like there's a little bit difference in loudness, of course. That's pretty common. That's a well-known thing, that there's a difference there. And usually the streaming like apps and stuff try to do a good job of trying to like level that out. But there's usually a timbre difference, and sometimes, like stuff from the 80s doesn't always translate the same as like something that was released last year. So what you're trying to do, I mean, I'm not really trying to make it sound like something from years ago, but I'm trying to present it, at least in this period of time, to where it connects, again, with your fans, and try to make it sound as full as it can. Usually, when you're done with the mix, you feel like, well, I can't do anything else. It's done.
Sounds pretty good.
Right. But, I mean, a big part of it is just having someone with experience put their ear on it.
Yeah.
Even though, most mix engineers are very confident and feel really good about when they're done, but there's elements that you don't always know. I mean, if you're listening to speakers and there's something in your room that's causing it to, I don't know, have some sort of tonal imbalance, and it's like you're just used to it.
Yeah.
You don't realize it until, you don't want it to be released and then listening to it somewhere else and go, ooh, what's wrong with my song? It's like,
that is really weird whenever you've been working on a mix for a really long time and you get so used to just the way that it sounds that, like, if you take a break from it for like a couple weeks and then you come back to it,
right,
you realize that thing that you thought sounded amazing, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this sounds like
weird.
Quiet.
Right. Yeah, and that's very true. And that's the thing with having somebody else work on it, is because they can immediately, I mean, you can give me like one of your songs, or, I can immediately go, oh, it sounds very good. The mix might be good, but it's like, hey, it could actually enhance by, having a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And it's like, okay, now we come back 5 years, you're still going to be going, yeah, it sounds great. It's just like, oh, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
So
you're an objective ear.
That's primarily what it is, honestly.
That's awesome.
It's less about the gear. I mean, I love gear just like all the other, geek tech engineers out there, but it's like, it's more about, I mean, you're paying me for my ears, paying me to go, this is good, or no, this needs some adjustment, and you're going to thank me later.
Yeah.
I mean, I ultimately want what the artist wants.
Right.
I don't want to just say, oh, this is the way it should sound. It's more, I usually kind of talk to the artist if they have some vision. Some artists will just say, well, I just want to hear what you want to do to it.
Yeah.
And then they tell me if that's good or not. But yeah, if they give me a vision of like, hey, this is what we were wanting, or, they might or might not have been happy after the mixing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can try to take it that extra direction.
Right.
To actually make it, sound more like what you wanted it to sound like.
Right.
And what you want your fans to hear you as, because ultimately that's what it needs to be. I mean, all the creative work is pretty much already done. I mean, the mixing is kind of where it stops, although there's a little bit of creativeness with the mastering, but it's more of like, I'm steering this whole ship. Everything else that's going on is
the ship has been built.
Yeah. Right.
And you're pointing it in the right direction.
Right. I mean, as far as the easiest way for the common person that doesn't know anything about even audio is to understand, it's kind of like what Photoshop does for a picture. Is like, okay, if you come to me with a great picture, and it's like, okay, this looks good, but I mean, does it look good enough to be on a magazine cover?
Right.
Probably not. I mean, I can take, and with my tools, audio tools, I can, bring out the colors more and crop it and shape it, and like, oh wow, okay, I didn't see it could look that good, kind of thing.
Right. God, that's so cool.
So perfection. That's what it is. It
just adds the sheen of perfection.
That's what we're going for.
Well, and it's cool because like I think the first time that I met you, I knew of you at ACM, but the first time that I actually got to interact with you was whenever we had you master the O Fidelis album that we put out. And it was
the dinosaurs and...
Yeah, Bible Promises
Bible
and Dinosaurs.
Promises and Dinosaurs.
we changed the name to Long Time Coming.
Long Time
because we took so long to get it mixed. But it was so cool getting it back from you and hearing the difference of like kind of going back to what you were just saying of like you think it sounds pretty good. And then you get it mastered and you get it back and then it really does. It's like just from the layman, from the artist standpoint, it just feels like it feels professional.
It has the feel of what you're looking for.
Yeah,
like that is the
feels
level
like it belongs on your stereo now.
Nice.
It belongs on your car radio.
Wow.
And like it just sounds like there's a legit feel to it. I don't know how to describe it. It's just it just sounds better.
Right.
So this is gonna be the title of mastering. It makes you legitimate.
Yeah, it makes you legit.
Well, that's the goal. I mean, it's like I'm not trying to change your art that you're making.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just if we can make it impact, that's probably the best word for it. Like impact better.
Right.
Where it's like it's hitting you, whether whatever style of music it is. It's like you said, it's sounding real now. It's not sounding like, okay, I made this. It's like no, it's saying, oh, did I make that? That's what
You could
what
send
I
your
want my
album-
artists to basically go, wow, okay.
Exactly.
That's us.
You could send your album to a lesser masterer, get it back, and it's like it's a rap album now. I don't.
We
remember
felt like
rapping.
it sounded better this way.
I thought we were a folk duet.
It's not quite.
Now we sound like Rage Against the Machine.
That's what you were going for. Right?
Yeah. What is exactly the process of mastering? You get all these files, and then what are the stages that you go through?
So basically, if I'm working on, say, an album, I usually get all the songs at one time, typically, unless it's still in process of mixing, which sometimes those roll in the next day or two if it's still, if there's a deadline and I need to go ahead and start.
Right.
But typically I get all the songs and I lay them out and I kind of skim through them and see if anything hits me as far as like one standing out better as far as like the mix. If one of them's like, hey, and sometimes the artists will tell me that. They're like, hey, you know what? Or if I just ask them, hey, what was the one you liked the best? And I'll go and listen to that one and go, let me figure out what it is that they liked about this one. And that can be anything. I've learned through the years that what you think people are listening to is not necessarily what they're listening to.
Interesting.
Like as far as like somebody could, there's terms that we use in audio that are like, some refer to like frequencies and treble and bass, and somebody will say, well, we just want it to sound lo-fi. Okay. All right. And then they'll give me a reference like, hey, well, it's kind of like this, we're not like this artist, but like this. And I'll listen to it and I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound lo-fi in my mind, but I have to figure out what it is that you're explaining that you feel like has that sound. And if there's anything I can do to kind of put it in there, then I'm going to try to do that. But basically, to answer your question, I basically get out and see if I can hone in on one to start with, to figure out, if I can make that one better or do anything to it. And the first thing I listen for is problems. And not all mixes will have problems. And again, nowadays I get mixes from everybody from professional engineers to, people in their home, mixing on a pair of headphones, which is fine, but it's, those aren't always easy as the ones that are professionally mixed in the studio, just because of the experience
quality
of the person mixing.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, if there's anything that needs correcting, I'll usually do it then. It could be like a common thing that happens with people that are mixing with headphones is they end up with like either too little bass or too much bass.
Right.
So it's like this huge, I'll put it on my system and pull up, and it's like, whoa, my goodness, it's going to blow up people's car if they release it like this. So I'll start with there, and I might need to kind of tame that back just so it'll like we can actually turn it up without blowing woofers and stuff like
I'm
that.
pretty sure all commercials need mastering because all commercials blow out my TV and they crank it up on purpose, and I know they do that.
Yes.
Especially the car commercial where the guy's screaming information at you.
You go from this amazing subtle scene in like Vikings or something, and then it's like, did you turn up the volume?
That's been a problem for years.
Yeah.
It's a trick.
They've tried to put laws to implement to try to help that, but they're still like they get around it.
Foolish.
But,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I listen for problems if I need to correct something, and then if it feels like the mix is still kind of just hanging out and it's just kind of not really like gelling together, then I'll try like different pieces of gear. So I have digital gear and analog gear too.
Okay.
And I'll like run it through pieces of gear and just kind of test the waters and see which one actually enhance it without like just start yanking knobs. I try to stay away from that as possible because, again, I assume when you send me a mix that you're happy with it.
Right.
You like how this sounds. So, again, if I can take it through and try different pieces of equipment that like maybe enhance it in some way, then I'll start from there. And then if there's problems in the mix, I'll fix those, and then I'll try to enhance it in more like a creative kind of approach.
Yeah. And
then at that point, after I do that for each of the songs, I try to, then there's the balancing out of getting, if it's an album, all of them where they're cohesive and they all timbrally match. So one's like song 8's not like, hurting you. And then song 3 is like, just you can't hear it because it's like all
so it's all one cohesive album. Like it sounds like it's all meant to be together.
And then from there, it's just kind of putting it all together so it flows evenly as an album, even though a lot of people don't consume music as an album anymore. So
I was say that was such a thing, like where you'd listen to the whole album and it would give you that feel of this is the artist, this is what they're trying to say through all of this album. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to be all nerdy and be like my dad, and like Led Zeppelin when he was there were, or whatever,
Vinyls it has made a comeback to some extent. Part of it is just the being able to have a tangible thing that you can hold.
Yeah.
And I think that's, really it's something that went away for so long, and it was like I think people lost a little bit of that. Like I want to touch my music. It's like I want to hold it again. Yeah. So I think that's why it's kind of came back, because it's definitely a younger generation that has embraced that. I want the album, which is funny because the older generation goes, "Oh yeah, I used to listen." Listen to Spotify.
I remember.
But
I think like the kids, these hipsters, they call them LPs. Did they call them LPs back in the day, or just vinyls?
Albums. I don't know.
Yeah, just albums.
Long plays. Whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's what you want to call it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I keep seeing tapes making a comeback.
Ooh,
cassette tapes.
My kids would have fun with cassette tapes, I think.
I bet.
Yeah.
Find one of those old bears that you put the tape in there.
Yeah, you know what I want to come back is hit clips. Did you ever have hit clips? And they're tiny little, it was a tiny machine, and it played 20 seconds of your favorite Britney Spears song, and you just pop it in, and it sounded like garbage. Speaking of the sound, it was just and you couldn't hear anything. But man, I had all of my favorite artists' hit clips.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for the 8-track to make a comeback.
Yeah.
We've got the vinyls, and they're back. The kids these days, they're messing around with tapes. My first car was a VW Bug with an 8-track player.
Nice.
And so I, as a young 18-year-old back in 2005, got to experience the whole being midway through a song, pause, click, wait for the next. Okay, continue on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
anyway,
so what are all these gadgets and gizmos that you have in your studio? Because you walk into your studio and it looks like it should be the Bat Cave. You have all these knobs and cool things going on.
Well, they're similar to what you'd see in a recording studio, but not all of the things are what you'd see in a recording studio. I mean, usually in a recording studio, if you go back to a classic studio that has a big console with sliders and faders and stuff like that, it's not quite like that, because everything I'm dealing with is stereo. It's just left and right. So most of my gear is 2 channels, and I mean I have several different equalizers that I can do different things with, and I have several compressors that I can have, dynamics control and flavor with, and as well as limiters, and then converter. That's it, and really my monitors. But it's not a lot. I mean, it's not like I have lots of effects and flangers and things like you'd use in a mix, because there's no need for it. But it's definitely they're different again than what you'd see in a classic recording studio.
Yeah.
Because they're so. I mean, a lot of the gear has to be like higher end, just because you want the quality. You know, if you've got your whole entire mix running through something, you want to make sure that it's good quality. Versus like if you're in a mix studio, you've got like one little radio vocal thing. It doesn't really matter if the quality's all that great, because you're just trying to get some sort of unique sound to it. But if I'm running your entire song through any piece of gear I have, it needs to be a quality. For me to feel good and for you to feel good about running your whole mix through it. So yeah, that's.
Can you touched on analog and digital a second ago, and I want to kind of hone in on that just a little bit, because I think, again, from like the novice music artist, that might be a little confusing. Can you kind of describe the biggest differences between analog and digital?
Yeah. So with the analog, I'm referring to people that if you don't know really what that is, it's running through the sound through usually it's some sort of piece of equipment that has knobs on the front.
Yeah.
Versus
actual hardware.
Exactly. Versus digital is usually something that's inside the computer.
Gotcha.
There's some sort of process and you can do inside the computer. And both of them have, strengths. I'm not like only analog or only digital. They both have equal strengths in my book. But basically the sound difference is what you can get through analog, you just kind of can't quite get with digital.
Yeah.
Because of just you're running through, the older kind of generation of stuff. You're running through all kinds of op amps and resistors and capacitors, and in some gear it's tubes and transformers and so on. So there's a certain element that will do to music that you can't really get in a computer. Now, today there's actually a lot of different pieces of software that will kind of emulate that. And that's, they come really, really close. They get very close. And in most people's platforms that they're using, it doesn't really matter if they might not have never used a piece of hardware equipment. So it does the job, and they're told that, hey, this is much like the original. So yeah, that's good. If you're in a situation where you can compare, like myself, there is still a difference. And what I would say, as far as if I was to explain the difference, typically with analog equipment, or let's say it's an equalizer that I have that I actually have in the digital side as well as the analog. I have a digital emulation, and I actually have the hardware. So the difference between those two is usually the things that will happen would be the width will kind of shrink down a little bit.
Okay.
You can notice that to a certain extent, and it depends on the level in which you push through the gear, like how loud you're operating the thing. That can change, because when they, when you get into the software and stuff and how they build these things, how they build what these call plugins, which are like emulations of hardware, they test them and they build them and they code them and all this stuff, and they do tons and tons of tests to try to make it sound exactly like the original, but they can only get to a certain point because, they might test it with like, this is going to be super geeky technical, but like with a tone, like a sine wave or something. Or, there's all sorts of ways that they create it. Sometimes they use these things called impulse responses to actually create the sound of it. But the factor of the dynamics, as far as how loud something is or how soft something is, that piece of gear will change depending on if you're running, like a song through it at a low level versus if you're running the song through it through a high level.
Right.
So the character of the unit changes. So the math that would be involved for doing that many different changes is just enormous. So that's the limitation that you still have with digital. I mean, you need a supercomputer to come up with all the different changes that could happen over, at least our hearing. We hear generally 20,000 frequencies. So it's like such an enormous amount.
Wow.
But it's amazing that we can actually get it as close as we can. But if you're comparing an apple to an apple and the same piece of gear with its digital emulation versus itself, that's one of the things you're going to hear. You're going to just hear a little bit of the collapse of the width, and the depth is going to, it's just not going to be quite
like
there.
the texture itself.
That's amazing.
It's one of those things you can't really like quantify and write down necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, you could with scopes and all that other stuff, but it's like it's more of like you just listen, and if you A-B back and forth means just listening to one or listening to the other. You can like, I can't really tell you, but it's better.
It just feels better. Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like sound it like kind of touches on a much more subconscious aspect than like, when you're working with video stuff, you can visually see the colors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like sound, it feels different. Analog feels different than digital.
Man.
And it's
That's
just
fascinating
really
to me.
Yeah,
really cool.
It is, and it's it's interesting because there's in the industry, I guess you could say there's a lot of people will say, well, I can't hear the difference, so it doesn't matter. Like, well, I'm going to tell you that
People can hear the difference.
Yeah.
More than likely, you can hear the difference. You're just not paying attention to the difference.
Yeah.
So with sound, it's this big thing that there's, don't get me started. There's all the experts out there.
Yeah.
But half the time, if they're listening and like, oh, I don't hear a difference. Like if I was to tell you the differences and then you listen, you would probably go, oh, I hear the differences.
Yeah.
But it's like being able to know, and that's, I guess that's just, that's just your experience of being able to.
Do you feel like, because I always feel like that your ears are kind of like a muscle that you have to develop in a way, like you just train your ears to be able to hear certain things. Because like whenever I'm working out on the set, like I'll point things out that other people just don't hear.
Yes.
But it's there. I can hear it. It's right there.
I like to say that I have the opposite ability as that, like, which is to zone out completely.
You can tune things
I
out.
can ignore any sound my child makes and everyone else can hear it, and I'm just like, what?
I think Oliver is dying.
He's fine. I have finely tuned ears to know when that is a death cry, okay? He's fine otherwise.
Well, you're right. You actually do have the ability to just to focus, to actually tune out. You actually do have the ability to tune out things.
I will. My husband is like one of those people. I'm going to throw him under the bus on this podcast. Again, Aaron Dunzo.
Buckle up, Aaron.
No, I think he'll find this really interesting because he is always the type of person that complains to me about the bass is too much. He's always, he'll hear it from our neighbors are playing some music and he hears just the bass. And it resonates with him so much more and irritates him to an extreme when he can just hear some bass mildly off in the distance somewhere.
Yeah.
Or if there's a TV show where there's just so much rumbling of a bass and you can't hear. He's always playing with the car music. It's funny to me.
There's like, this would be a little tangent, but like.
I think his ear is just a little bit more in tune for that than I am.
I think biologically, isn't it true that males and females hear different frequencies over time?
Well, they do have different sensitivities to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as like their ears are basically, well, let me step back. As humans, we're supposed to have a general kind of, normal kind of hearing. It's based on these curves that are called Fletcher-Munson curves that if you learn physics, you'd understand like what that usually looks like as far as certain frequencies are more sensitive to us than others. Now, just like your taste buds or anything else, certain people are going to have different, sensitivities of that normal curve.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, some people might be more sensitive in certain areas than others. I mean, this actually is kind of a funny topic because this is what I use to kind of try to explain how, people that make speakers, these manufacturers, there's all different, and everybody likes to say, oh, these are better.
These are better. Yeah.
These are better. Well, it's like, and everybody's got their favorite, even in the professional world, but it's like, well, okay, my ears more than likely are just ever bit slightly different from yours.
Mm-hmm.
So what actually works for me and sounds right might not be exactly the same as for you. So that kind of explains that. Now, as far as like our hearing, my hearing physically is not necessarily any better than yours or yours. I mean, at least scientists will tell us that typically females have better hearing than males, at least when they're born.
Interesting.
And then over time, we kind of degrade our own hearing. But a lot of that depends on if you work at the airport every day.
Right.
You're gonna
you go to concerts every night with no earplugs.
Exactly. But as far as like my side of it, as far as the engineering, mastering, or recording, or whatever you're doing, it is a skill that you learn, and being able to hear certain things, because you're not like a prodigy born out of the womb. And, I can master anything.
Like a mutant.
Mix great, and I'm 5.
That's the next. We did a sketch called X-Men JV Squad, right?
Yeah, with the most useless superpowers.
But I think the next one should be a follow-up with all of these superpowers.
Like realistic superpowers.
Like realistic, like I'm born to master, and I have the perfect ears. And like, I don't know, what else? I'm born to speak into a microphone. My timbre is amazing. Like, I don't know, something like that. Is that the right words? Am I using the right? Like, I don't even know if I'm using the right words.
There's a plane coming over the horizon.
Yeah.
What do you? Oh, go ahead.
So I was just going to get back to what you were
tangent.
asking. I mean, you have to learn and develop that hearing over time.
Skill. Okay.
And then there's different things of that. If we want to get real technical here, I mean, there's like the equalizing, hearing the frequencies, and then there's the dynamics, hearing like compression and hearing that at a subtle amounts. And it's one of those things that if you get into it and you really use your ears every day, like I do, it's like you can just tell, when something's not like it's supposed to be, or if it's too much or too little. So, I mean, I probably have better hearing of somebody my age only because I can concentrate and hear things that people can't necessarily turn off the other things and focus on.
Right.
But my physical hearing is just going to, be like a normal human.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hopefully it's here forever. As far as like being able to hear you, it is an ability. It's not something you're necessarily born with.
Okay.
Right.
It's something you have to learn.
Ah, that's interesting. So fascinating. I love science.
In any of your classes, was this like an aspect of learning something? Like, did you study mastering at all in any of your classes? I don't know what they offer as far as like teaching these things.
Years ago, no.
Okay.
So I've been mastering about 10 years ish. Before that, I was recording and mixing for all leading up to that. And no, there wasn't. I mean, I've done several different aspects of learning. I've gone through all kinds of seminars and conferences and personal training with lots of different engineers. I've done some in New York and LA as well. So because there's not a lot of us around here, so I've had to go afar to kind of like to get more training in that way. But as far as learning how to listen, that has developed through just years of listening as well, and the difference between mastering and like mixing is you are listening differently.
Right.
And, fortunately for myself, I kind of have, since I came from the recording mixing side, I know what typically an engineer is listening for and listening to. And then knowing, it's kind of like seeing the forest and the trees to some extent.
Yeah.
It's like as mastering, you're just looking at the trees, or you're looking at the forest essentially.
Right.
But although you can kind of zoom in and look at the tree specific, the bark, if you need to.
Tree.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what you're listening for, and listening to the different ways of listening. It's like I'm not really concerned with, a guitar that you put in there that you were doing a special, effect to. It's like, okay, it's just part of the music to me.
Yeah.
It's like, is the music moving? If there's something I can do to kind of bring that out because you didn't bring it out and you wanted to bring it out more, I might be able to kind of do that just as a byproduct of what I do. Mm-hmm. But, I can't necessarily change what you've given
right,
me.
Yeah.
Make it sound better.
Can you make this sound?
Make me play better.
What do you see as the future of technology? Like, it feels like our technology every year is just coming out with something new and something better and better and better. Where do you see the future of the technology of mastering going from here?
That's an interesting question, because the tools have been getting better and better through the years. But the interesting thing about it is, it still takes a person to kind of make the judgment call as far as like, you know, I do think there is a way. You don't necessarily have to you don't necessarily have to master with analog equipment. But again, back to what I said, I think at this point there's still an element of that just gives, it's kind of a byproduct of how we've been able to capture music all these years. It's like if you go way back, you know, to the 50s, they were using tube gear, and you know, everything had vacuum tubes and all this other stuff just to capture it. And along the way, that actually added something that they weren't really they were trying to be the best they could possibly be, but the noise was still pretty loud. You know, there's all these different things that have added to what we listen and appreciate of what it's done. And if you try to be super clean and super linear and you know, basically just make it just perfectly pure, it actually doesn't sound good. It's like it doesn't sound good to our ear. So all that equipment, I think, will still always have a place. It is an interesting thing because with some of the gear takes maintenance because it doesn't always last forever. And even the highest end gear you would think would last forever, but it's kind of like a race car. I mean, it only does one race. You got to rebuild the engine, but with high-end audio gear, you still have to have maintenance done to it. So as time goes by, the people that maintain that kind of equipment are getting fewer and fewer. Like if something breaks for me,
like a specialty almost, it becomes, it's like the like clocks, antique clocks.
I was just thinking that.
I don't know why it made me think of that, but like there are fewer and fewer master clock. What do they call them? Clockmakers,
All right. So like usually, I mean, I have to send mine off if it's not something that I can fix. I mean, I have some electronics knowledge, but there's a certain level that it's like, okay, I don't know what's going on under here. So I have to send it back typically to the manufacturer because there's not like local TV shops to fix that kind of thing. It's hard enough for musicians.
Go to the pawn shop. No.
It's hard enough for musicians to find like a local, you know, amp. There's a few guys in town that will, you know, repair amps and stuff, but it's getting harder and harder to find people with that skill set. So that's going to be a concern. I mean, it already has it's a pretty much a concern with the recording studios and those the ones that still have large consoles.
Right.
Those have a lifespan. There's things like capacitors that will actually kind of start to leak over time. And
interesting.
And basically that little component over long periods of time will just cause the unit it'll start sounding bad and noisy, and then it'll just stop working eventually. So you have to rebuild it essentially, and it's a lot of man hours, and it's almost not worth it unless you just have the love for that piece of equipment to have somebody rebuild it or recap it is what it's called. And again, it can be very expensive. And like if you were local here and you had to have a console recapped, I mean, you would have to fly somebody here and pay God for a week. It can be, you can end up doubling the cost of the thing easily. Wow. Even though it's, you know, its stuff is vintage and it sounds good, there's still an element that it'll fail at some point. Just like a car will fail over, you know.
Do you feel like in the film world, our equipment is kind of being, you're getting better quality equipment for less money? Do you feel like that's happening in the music world as well?
Yes.
Okay.
For sure. Again, in the software stuff, back to what I was saying earlier with the emulations, those are really great. I mean, they're still fantastic for what they do. I mean, it's like you can build a home studio for a fraction of the cost of that same kind of quality that you would want like 10 years or 15, 20 years ago. But it's just, you know, that the thing about it is, so, okay, back to what you were saying as far as the equipment. Now, mastering specific equipment, that there's that element. So those classic pieces like that I use myself, those might eventually go away. I don't know. So it might end up all digital. I actually think that there's probably a point that it's going to, just because of the way things are moving. Now, at that point, are people going to even care? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, it's an element. I mean, if vinyl makes a comeback right now, and it's like people care. It's like, okay, so, you know, that could continue to travel on its way, and people, you know, right now that in the vinyl manufacturing business. So, like, I don't have a lathe myself. Usually if I do something for vinyl, I prepare it for vinyl, and then it goes to a cutting engineer. But those cutting lathes, I mean, there's different lathes. There's Scully and there's Neumann lathes. And those are, the newest one, I think, was built like in the 80s. I mean, it's like most of them are all old. And their parts
Which was 40 years ago now.
Exactly. So
that's crazy.
I mean, the machines are just getting older and older. And, you know, it's just eventually, unless something happens with somebody coming out with a new technology, at least for that, it's going to go away.
Yeah.
And so that's a concern.
That is,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Well, see, that's something I would never think about, but it makes total sense. It
Well,
would,
it's
it
kind
would go away.
I feel like just on the film side of things, like as you get higher quality quote unquote stuff for lower prices, that becomes prioritized over the older equipment, and so they phase out just from, you know, the basis of the free market.
right.
And I think in the arts, as far as equipment and all that kind of, and the technology and stuff, I think that there is something to be said about people being passionate about maintaining stuff, and like having a renaissance of, you know, things like we're seeing puppetry making a comeback, and we're seeing film making a comeback. But I don't know. I like with sound stuff, I don't see us ever going back to tape decks, you know,
No.
and like old school mics and equipment and everything,
Right.
just from the nature of how it all works. Well, in just a second, we're going to hear some fun stories from back in the day with Mr. Kevin Lively.
Yes.
Right after these messages.
Y'all know me. Know how I earn a living. I'll insure this bird for you, but it ain't gonna be easy. It's tough production. Not like going down to the film school and having Mom and Aunt Gilly supplying the catering. This show, swallow you whole. No sinking or tenderizing. Down you go. You shoot it quick, but it's not gonna be pleasant. Now, Outgate is a commercial insurance broker with film and entertainment expertise headquartered in Oklahoma. It means you get the Oklahoma film rebate and local people available anytime you need them. Thing about this director, he's got black eyes like doll's eyes. His last show, 100 men started production. Only 23 came out. Meal penalties took the rest. Outgate Insurance. Our website's at oklahoma-film.com. They place annual policies for producers of all types. Post-production E&O, specific film project policies for budgets of all sizes. And they work with musicians too. Place an insurance for gigs and events of all types. No matter what's your budget, whether it's $5,000 or $15 million. Outgate Insurance can toss you a lifeline. And they can also find you coverage for post-production errors and omissions. You're gonna need it in order to get your film distributed. I'll cover pre-pro, production, post, the whole damn thing. Call Outgate at 918-574-4555 for your movie's production insurance. That's 918-574-4555, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Quint. We'll take it under advisement.
I'll never wear a life jacket again.
And we're back. I love our ad breaks.
And we're back.
And we're back. You know, one of these days, we're going to do this like an actual real radio show, and I'm totally going to do that. And we're back. So you have been in the industry for nearly 3 decades.
Oh, gosh.
So with that amount of time, I'm sure you have just like a laundry list of stories and fun times.
Adventures.
I do.
What are some doozies that you have locked away?
You know, it's funny. So I teach at ACM, and students will ask me that all the time as well. And it's hard to kind of recall them unless something like triggers, like, oh yeah, I got
this
this
one
great
time.
story. Because I mean, you know, in the days of recording that I did, there's not all sessions are just, flow really well.
Right.
And sometimes, you get enough creative people in the room, you're going to have some arguments. I don't know if you're aware of that, but
some opinionated people.
People are very consciously,
we'll call them passionate.
Exactly. That's
a great word to use.
That's perfect. And so, I'm trying to think. I don't want to mess anybody's names up.
We don't have to drop any names.
I've been in the studio with people getting in fights and throwing phones and
I wondered if people threw stuff. Yeah, damage to equipment.
So
there I was with the usher.
So this was an artist that didn't. They actually didn't come out on. They were on a label, but they didn't. Or actually, no, I take that back. They were in a pre-production agreement with a production company, and I was in the studio working with them, and it was a rap group in my days of it in the ATL. So
yeah, buddy.
It was funny because there was this one guy that was kind of the executive producer, and he was there, and he had let's just say maybe he had spent some time locked away at one point.
He did time.
And, he's not some that you would want to mess with.
Right.
This one guy that was the rapper, he was, he's younger. He's, I don't know, probably 19, 20. And they got in a fight in the middle of it. And they were really literally face to face yelling. And I was thinking, man, I don't know if I would mess with him. I really, I'm a big guy, but I would not want to mess with him.
I think he made a shank out of that mic stand just a second ago.
And he left the studio, and me and there was another engineer there, and we were just kind of looking at ourselves like, okay, there's no more creative work today. I guess we should go home. But there's been those stand out in my mind. But let me think of one that's. There's one. This is somebody that you would recognize. So, I had the opportunity to work with ARETHA FRANKLIN before, and so this is years ago, obviously. And she, back when she was alive, she did not fly. Mrs. Franklin did not fly.
I did not know that.
And so you came to her.
Wow!
If you worked, and she lived in Detroit, and this was great. So. I was with, there was myself and another engineer, and it was my mentor, Tom Kidd, and the producer, Daryl Simmons, and we all went up there, and we were in the studio called Vanguard. I'm not even sure if it's around anymore, but it's a really well-known studio during that time, and she came in, and most of the track was already done, and she was just doing vocals, and she sang this part down, and so Daryl he's a very well-respected person in the industry, and he typically, if he says something, you go, oh, okay, yeah, all right, good, and because he's done it long enough, he knows what's going on. And it's funny because she sang a part down, and he asked her, which is nothing normal. Typically it's you get several passes of a vocal or whatever, and no matter who it is. And he said, hey, all right, Mrs. Franklin, would you just do one more pass right there? And she stopped, and she said, I like that one. And he said he was totally professional and nice. He was like, yeah, but just give us one more just for a safety. And she was like, no, I like that one. That's the one I'll hear on the record.
Oh wow!
And we the talk back. We just undo it and just okay
then.
I guess we'll move on.
ARETHA Franklin said
that was hilarious.
Oh man,
it was okay. Well, the Queen of Soul. What
are you going to argue?
Oh no, you're right. That is the best.
What if it was a situation where you were just you click on the talkback mic. Ms. Franklin, you farted on that tape.
Something terrible and random.
I really don't think you want to keep that one.
It wasn't your voice. It was
yes, AC.
Oh my god. How often did you have to travel to other?
Not very.
Was that common?
No, not very often. She's one of the few.
Fly to me.
She's just
hey,
she was the Queen.
I'll
of Soul,
do it.
So
yeah, man.
Really.
No arguments there.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Imagine if that would have become an argument. If he was dead set, no. We're going in for another take.
And she would probably walk out
to the ground.
Okay,
and I'm done.
Yeah. What a way to lose a contract.
Right.
Man.
Yeah, I wish I could think of like more. You asked me to think about more, and I'm trying to think like, on the spot.
It's
here.
tricky.
No, I'm trying to. Let's see if I can just be like, hey, have you ever met this person? No, I won't play that game.
I could think of like, for me, the first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to recording music is whenever me and my friends were, trying our thing, we thought that if we were on some kind of a substance, it somehow enhanced the recording. Not the case. Because what would happen over and over is that we'd have a raucous night, and then we'd listen back the next day after we sobered up, and we're like,
It's garbage.
this will never see the light of day.
Garbage.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah, how many times have you had people like trashed trying to perform?
Well, it's actually, that's not as much of a thing now.
That's
it
good.
doesn't seem like there
That's
was
very
a period
good.
of time. I mean,
I feel like in the 80s, I don't know. I just know the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg.
well, that
okay?
definitely was going on back in. I mean, that
Okay.
was actually a little before my time. But there was. I mean, I worked with artists that weren't always themselves. You could say.
It's a good way to put it.
And they're not always it's not always a creative thing.
It's not conducive with success,
Not
shall we
really.
say.
I mean, again, it's rock and roll. I mean, there's a lot of that going on, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but it's usually in the recording part of it, there's usually those behind the scenes things. You watch documentaries where it's like, okay, they took a year and a half in the studio and they came out with one song. Like, well,
Right.
Yeah.
well, there's a reason.
Oh, yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
There's a reason
Totally.
that happened because
And I should clarify for the listeners, we were only drinking alcohol. Although, but I know people that would they would claim that, man, whenever I'm baked or something like that, it just makes it so much better. And I'm like,
To you.
I don't think that's true.
To you.
No, I mean, and nowadays, like I said, it's typically, I mean, I'm not involved in the creative making.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
So
Yeah.
I'm not around that. So others
Do you ever
could
just get
probably speak
clips
if
of
it-
them totally drunk and they're like, yeah.
No, I don't ever have. No, typically it's all.
Blackmail.
So
they've
sorry.
cut off those.
Sent you the wrong audio file. Whoopsie daisy.
Yeah. Well, what kind of advice would you give? We'll start with the musician. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to a musician beyond don't do drugs and drink
Yes,
while trying
obviously.
to make a career?
That actually is a very good question because I since I speak to students oftentimes and I try to encourage them, but I mean really just sticking with it is the biggest thing. Anybody that's been doing this for any substantial length of time will just tell you that it's not always as easy as you think. I mean, it's the whole rose-colored glasses. It's not going to be like, hey, it's going to work out this way, and then I'm going to, and I'm going to collect my check, and
Yeah.
I mean, music is art, and if you really get back to it, it's only been in the last, 70 years that you can
Right.
actually make a living in it. Typically, an artist,
true.
whether they
I
were
know, yeah.
whether they were played an instrument or painted, it's like they were poor their whole life.
Well, yeah, and
typically.
and
Yeah.
well before then, it's like looked down upon. Like the theater musicians, they're the poor, dirty folk you don't
right.
speak to, but you go watch. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So, I mean, when you put that in perspective, you go, it is a passion. And it's like you do it because you love it, and that's what you have to do because it's just that's in you. And if you're an artist, you're trying to get that out and speak to people that way. If you're a painter, you're trying to get that out and speak to people that way. So you just have to keep in perspective what your expectations are. There's a lot of people that get into this thinking, because they're watching music videos, that I'm going to be rolling in a Lamborghini, in a year. Right. What goes viral on YouTube. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that actually happens sometimes to people. But it's what you see. Actually, it's funny because those videos, it was funny because I remember working with some artists that it's like they would go make those videos and they didn't own anything in the video. It's like people think that that's like them and that's their life. They don't even own that. They leased it just to make the
Just to
video.
make the video.
Right. And it's like, I guess that happens a little bit in any kind of style music, but in rap and hip hop sometimes there's a lot of that, rolling down, throwing money out the window and stuff. It's like it's just
facade.
It's all a facade.
Exactly.
For the song,
Which,
yeah.
You know, it doesn't. I'm not poking fun at rap. It's just that it's in any style of music. It's it's an art. I mean, and they do it because they love it. Or if you're in a band, you know, and you're getting your music out because you love it, and it's like making money while you're doing that is just a blessing from that. And it's great. And my advice is just to stick with it. And it's like, you know, it's going to pay off when it's good.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not saying that everybody that tries to be an artist is going to make it. I mean, usually they get weeded out as you grow up. Typically, if you don't have it, you don't make it all the way to American Idol and have something like whoever the judge is telling you. I don't know who's been telling you you're great, but it's you know. I mean, but that's good. The reality of it. It's just, and so, you know, you want people to speak truth in your life and not just tell you, hey, it's fabulous.
Yeah,
it's fabulous.
Right, 100%. Especially if you're speaking young students.
Exactly.
Speaking truth about that situation and the.
But when you're around people that are truly like have that extra thing, it's like you really want to make sure those people keep moving forward and just stick with it. I know that today is a little bit different time period than it was like even when I started, but it's I don't know. There's a lot of challenges that are different now.
Yeah.
It's always hard. Music is a hard business to get into.
No joke.
Especially if you want that to be your sole source of income. And, you know, it's interesting because, again, at ACM, where I've got some students that there's a lot of them that work kind of in the box. A lot of them do electronic music, which is great. But they're not always aware that, you know, making that particular music by yourself, only for yourself, and, you know, putting it out, it might not get received like what you think. And at the same time, you know, even if you do have one song that becomes a hit, you know, that's not going to buy your Cheerios for the rest of your life. So you need to have at least a plan or a direction, as well as making connections. I mean, this whole business is about, you know, connections and working with people. Yes. It's not like, you know, sitting in front of that laptop over there and then like making out a hit and then, you know, uploading it to YouTube and I'm going to collect a check and go buy, you know, a Ferrari. It just doesn't happen that way. And I think with, you know, a lot of people just, you know, I mean, we all know like what social media does. It only shows what the highlights of everybody's life. And and only people are only going to post like, you know, a great thing. They're not going to post like
all
5
the other
days,
takes
of leading up to that. So it's really a hard deal nowadays for young musicians, because if they can't see like anything better, it's like they get really depressed and can start diving.
The time dedication that it takes to reach quote unquote success. I feel like success is such a subjective word, especially in the entertainment industry, just because it's like, what is that?
Right. I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
Like, you got to figure that out for yourself, I guess.
Success, you being happy, success,
yeah,
buying
getting
a house and
solely paid to do what you want to do. What's
Right.
the level?
not
Where
having to
do
work
you
anymore.
see it?
Is that
Yeah.
success?
Setting those expectations
Yeah.
are important. I mean, that's a
Success
hard
is
thing to do, but
swimming
it's smart.
around in my safe full of gold coins.
like McDuck from
Yes. In my weird one-piece bathing suit. Now, what advice would you give to aspiring mixers and, you know, people that are working in the recording booth?
Yes.
That would be to stick with it. Again, it's hard to get started in the beginning usually, but once you get going, it's like you just kind of ride the wave a little bit. I mean, it might come in large, you know, quantities, like where you just can't ever get a time to breathe because you're working constantly and people are needing stuff, and you know, and then there might be seasons where it's like you're not working. It's like letting yourself not get worried about that, and knowing that it's going to be fine. Now, it doesn't mean you just sit around and just wait for stuff to happen. It's good to kind of be proactive and try to, you know, meet people and reach out to people and stuff like that. But yeah, just sticking with it is the biggest thing. because it's real easy to quit, and it's real easy to get down. Like I said, go back to at ACM, I have students that will email me after they've been out of school for a while, and they'll, I can hear it just reading their email, that they're kind of like down, and they're like trying to find something. And I usually try to do all I can to try to help them in one way. But oftentimes the ideal of what you have in your head of where you want to be is not where you'll be in 3 weeks. It might be where you're going to be in 3 years, but you just got to be kind of patient enough to get to that point.
Right.
And not just like get depressed and,
Give
throw it
up.
away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where,
I mean, it's
what kind of let's just say if I were starting out saying, I think I want to go this direction of mixing or mastering or whatever, what's a good initial internship-y type job for experience sake to dive into first? Like to get to know maybe the equipment or like a studio, like what venue would be the best kind of
well, I mean,
position to start?
and this is not to promote the school necessarily, but a school is a good way to start, because even those that are doing stuff on their own, working in DAWs, and they're composing music or they're engineering, you go back to like years and years and years ago, and there wasn't really schools that would teach this, and now there are. And it's not like the teachers don't know what they're doing. I mean, there's like myself and all the people at least down at ACM
working.
We're all working professionals. So it's like you're getting it from the people that are actually doing it. It's not we're just not hired to teach there. So starting out there, and you gain at least your feet, get your feet wet and stuff. And then from there, there's a lot of different places. I mean, let's say you're in the technical side and you want to engineer, I mean, you couldn't go to studios. There's several studios in town here that have opportunities that'll take on interns and things like that. And, just being around those studios will get you an idea about how things really work in the real world. Even though we try to do that there, it's not always like, exactly how it all works. So there's that. And then there's also the whole other area of doing live sound. That is one of the most money-making ways of audio. I mean, to make money in audio, that a lot of people it's not as glamorous necessarily as being in the studio, people seem to think. But there's lots of work. I mean, there's like lots and lots of churches that.
So that's something where you see like churches that hire the people to do those boards or to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've even done that for a number of years.
I mean, Life Church.
Yeah.
They're
Oh my
just
gosh,
doing so much.
I was there for a number of years, and I did that for a while. And like I said, there's lots of lots of different places, and they need people that know what they're doing. And there's clubs, of course, and then there's venues, I mean, there's sports venues. There's all kinds of different places that you can make money and still develop your skills while you still might be like working towards building your own studio if that's what you want to do. Yeah. So some people will tend to just like think, okay, I'm only going to do this, and it's not like that. I mean, when I got started, in the studio, I mean, there was studio sessions every single day. It was going round the clock because it was so busy during that time period. But it's not quite that way, because you're trying to convince the artists that are doing it themselves, hey, hire me to record you. And that's a difficult thing, because it's like,
I can do it myself.
Exactly.
But the advantage is obviously of having someone record you are massive, so that you're gonna get it's gonna give you all those. So
just connecting with people and making one of the biggest things that I try to convince the students there at ACM is just if you can connect and meet as many friends as possible, that's going to benefit you when you leave here. Yeah, because you've got production students there that are learning how to record, and you've got performance students there that are learning how to perform. And it's like, these are the people that you're going to want to work with. Right. It's like they're right across the hall. Go meet them. Please. Because, if you just build it and then just wait for the phone to ring, it doesn't always work that simple.
People skills. Having people skills. Well, Kevin, if somebody wants to reach out to you to get their album mastered, how do we reach out to you?
My webpage, kevinlilymastering.com, or I'm on Facebook. I'm not a huge social media guy, so I don't even have an Instagram. Actually,
I feel you.
That's okay. Yeah, my husband's trying to convince me to get off all of it, but
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet.
So yeah, there, and that has all my contact, has my number. You can reach out to me.
Fantastic.
Stuff.
Kevin Lively, thank you so much for
you.
coming on. This
Thank
has been
you.
such
It's
a
wonderful
cool
to
thing to
meet
pick your
you.
brain.
Yeah, it was an honor to be here.
So now we know everything about freaking mastering that I didn't know before.
I am so overwhelmed with the amount of information. That I mean,
a lot of science
it's
going on
so
there.
technical, but this is the type of thing that like I would never know about, but it's amazingly fascinating.
Yeah. It's just like all the specific details of the stuff that he does.
Holy cow.
Which I don't know if I mentioned this, but so the reason why I know Kevin is because he mastered our O Fidelis album, the last one that we
that's
put out.
right.
And
Okay,
he's
yeah.
also mastering our EP that we're getting ready to put out. Nice. Spoiler alert, we got an EP that's coming out.
That's all. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, just like it's crazy hearing the before and the
So
after
your
of
personal
this stuff.
experience with it was probably pretty amazing.
Yeah.
From your end and now hearing it from his end as well.
Yeah.
Does it line up
hears-
like
Oh, yeah, no,
were
absolutely.
there things
Like,
that blew your mind?
you know, he hears the original album. I hear the original album, and you got to keep in mind that you've been listening to that same thing over and over the course of months, and you're like, okay, my brain is settled on this. Then you hand it off for a couple weeks. Then you get it back, and it's like it's shimmering gold. Oh, and you're like, what the crap is this? Is
like-
that me? So it's priceless, and you should always get your stuff mastered. So with that in mind, what are you thinking for a game today?
I think we should do just a little scene. I think we should
Okay.
do a little scene. Maybe I feel like we could. How about just like a A/B kind of back and forth scene?
Okay.
But yeah, we're gonna be old time, like I'm talking old, like medieval-esque healers or
Oldie healers.
medical people.
Okay.
But they don't have science. Like there hasn't been science yet.
Pre-science.
I mean, truly,
medical
think about
expertise.
it. Yeah, pre-science. Like we'll just go with what we're picking, cherry
Diagnosing.
picking.
Okay.
I mean,
got
not
it.
all science, but like basically.
Okay, so relationship, patient, and
Patient
healer?
doctor, patient healer?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Doctor, I've got a problem.
Welcome.
Yes, I've got a real problem. You see.
Oh yes. First, I'm going to need to smell your breath as you speak and tell me your ailments while I smell your breath.
Right. Well, I had some ale this morning.
I smell it. Yes.
You smell the ale? Now, do you smell the sourness? I'm smelling it coming out of my own face into my nose.
Yes. I do get a slight whiff. Whiffed.
Right.
Okay, well, now that initial exam has been performed, please continue to describe your ailments as I tap around just a tiny little needle. I'm just going to kind of go around your body and poke you, all right? But just explain what's going on while I'm just going to take this tiny hammer and take this tiny nail and just tap around and your body will respond. It will respond. So tell me as you
I can feel the healing even as we speak. But for some reason, my butthole feels like a rose bush.
Oh, very interesting. All right. Do you feel it here?
I do.
Lower?
I feel it right in my butthole.
You feel it in your butthole, but
Yes, even though
but
you're hitting my
I'm
elbow.
hitting your elbow. That's a very interesting.
Strange. And
Okay,
my nose,
okay,
my
yes.
nose feels like a possum's underbelly.
Oh my! It's very interesting. It's soft. Is it wet? Is it? Let me
It's
feel.
slightly wet.
Hold on. I need to feel.
I would dare
the
say that the
nose.
possum's underbelly is rabid.
Feel the nose. I need to feel the mucus. Coming out of your nose. Might I find the? I don't know what to call this tension when you raise your fingers and you see the. It's because viscosity has not been invented yet, so I can't. It's
This what?
viscosity. Exactly. Don't worry.
That sounds like something that hasn't been invented yet.
Don't worry. I am a very good healer. Okay, so I'm going to do everything I can.
You've been recommended by all the squires.
Yes, it is correct. All right. Well, now that I've heard, we've got 3 symptoms so far.
Right.
I'm
Rose
going
bush
to need
butthole.
Rose bush butthole with a tingling
Yes.
from the elbow into
Right.
inside.
Yes.
We've got
Possum's underbelly nose.
Sour breath with ale, obviously.
Yes.
And possum's underbelly nose.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
What could it be?
Hum very lightly.
Yes. Okay.
While I pinch, I'm just going to pinch the backs of your legs all the way down to your ankles. But I need you to hum so I can hear the subtle changes because your legs are connected to your vocal cords.
I see.
Okay.
Only the finest.
Just going to go on down and hum. Yeah. Oh, that right there. Well, that's a typical spot. Yes, that's a knee. That's the back of your knee, good boy. Yes. Okay, all the way down. Down. Okay. And did you find arousal during this process?
Well,
anywhere in your body,
arousal.
anywhere. An arousal of your body at any location, centralized.
right. Well, for some reason, my eyes feel swollen now.
You know, I think I figured it out.
What? What's wrong with me?
Now, do you perhaps sleep outside with your dog?
I do.
You do.
I do. He's a basset hound.
Yes, I think I know what the problem is.
I see.
You're turning into a dog.
Not again!
Don't worry.
Ah,
I have a solution.
fool me once!
I have a potion for it.
A potion?
Just let me go get it. It'll be $800.
Oh, dash it all. I'm going to have to sell my basset hound. 800 American dollars?
Yeah. I feel like I was a time traveling doctor. And in all honesty, I was like, you guys don't know science yet, but it'll just explain.
You know what? That would actually be
But like
very
really bad. Like I'm a bad fraud doctor that travels back because I lost my license in the future.
Clearly, you're from the future, but you're really bad at this.
I can practice medicine in the past. That would be an amazing. Oh my gosh! I think we just figured out. My mind is blowing right now, Brian. I'm late. Okay, hear me out.
Okay.
This combines all of my favorite things,
Okay.
like a Criminal Minds-esque, Dexter-esque, Outlander-esque show.
Ooh, did we just come up with a pilot?
I'm telling you, we did. Someone who is a listener, write this pilot for us.
Okay.
This is the story of a time-traveling doctor who's also a serial killer. So we got Dear John-esque.
Ooh, yeah.
But they lost their license in the future, so they go back, and it becomes the world's first serial killer where they're just going on a straight murder spree in like whatever time period. But they're doing it under the guise of healing.
Ooh, title, The Healer.
The Healer.
Ooh, I like it.
Now, if this has already been made, don't tell me.
Yeah, right. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you yourself would like to get involved in what we're doing here, you can go to patreon.com/OkieShowShow. You can also check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we'll see you guys in the next 2 weeks. Yes. Bye.
The Okie Show Show is a mostly harmless media podcast recorded at Tower Studios in Oklahoma City. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If you're a business or industry professional that would like to advertise on the podcast, email info@okieshowshow.com. Rates starting as low as $25.